The new toy box was still neatly wrapped in our living room from last weekend. That morning, Mira quietly looked at it and said, "I'm bored." I looked across the shelves and could barely find any empty space. Dolls, puzzles, and toy cars filled every corner, yet Mira still seemed quietly distant. Every new purchase brought a smile at first. Just a few days later, it quietly blended into another forgotten pile. I found myself wondering if we had been giving too much, or maybe we were missing something that mattered far more. My name is Clara. As a mother, I always believed gifts were a simple way to show love, and I never imagined that belief would one day begin to change. Our days followed the same familiar rhythm. Armand left early for work while I prepared breakfast and packed Mira's school lunch. Before leaving, Mira paused in front of her toy shelf. She opened one box, then quietly closed it again without really playing. On the way home from school, we passed the toy store we often visited. Mira's eyes immediately settled on the display window. "That toy is really cute, Mom," she said, pointing to a new doll. I smiled softly while the familiar calculations quietly returned to my mind. That night, after everyone was asleep, I opened our family budgeting app. I saw expenses for birthdays, little rewards after good grades, and a few impulse purchases that had once seemed reasonable. The total wasn't making it hard for us to pay the bills. Even so, I found myself wondering why those purchases hadn't made our home feel happier. The next morning, I straightened the living room once again. The toys were already scattered, and Mira sat on the floor whispering, "I don't know what I want to play with." A few days later, I asked Mira if she wanted to choose a few toys she no longer used. I expected her to hesitate, but she had already forgotten that some of them had ever been hers. I picked up a doll she had once wanted more than anything. I could still remember how happy she had been bringing it home, even though it now sat quietly beneath a layer of dust. I started noticing something I had never really seen before. Every new gift brought excitement for a little while, and then everything quietly returned to the way it had been. At first, I told myself that this was simply how children were. They lost interest quickly and always found something new to enjoy. But the pattern kept repeating itself. The shelves became more crowded, while the words, "I'm bored," seemed to appear more and more often. One afternoon, as I cleaned the living room, I felt more tired than usual. It wasn't because there were so many toys to put away, but because it felt as though I was chasing something I could never quite reach. I didn't reach any conclusions that day, but for the first time, I quietly wondered if we had been filling our home with things when what we truly needed might have been something else. The following weekend, Armand invited me to the shopping mall. We only planned to pick up a few things for the house. As usual, our steps eventually led us to the toy aisle. The bright lights and colorful displays caught Mira's attention before anything else. "I promise this is the last one," she said as she hugged a small box. Her words sounded so sincere that I found it difficult to say no. I looked over at Armand. He answered with a small smile, as if one more toy would not really matter. On the way home, Mira held the box tightly on her lap. She looked so happy that I felt we had made the right choice again. 2 days later, the toy was already lying beneath the sofa with the others. Meanwhile, Mira wandered through the house again, quietly saying, "Mom, I'm bored." That was when my uneasiness became harder to ignore. Maybe what we had been giving her brought brief excitement, but not necessarily memories that truly stayed with her. From the outside, our days still felt warm and familiar. We shared dinner, laughed through a movie, and talked about how our day had gone. But every time I tidied the house, my eyes returned to the toy shelf that kept getting fuller. I found myself wondering who all of those things had really been bought for. One evening, I opened our family budget again. I added up birthday gifts, little rewards after school, and all the spontaneous purchases we had called acts of love. The total would have been enough for a short family vacation. That thought stayed with me longer than I expected. Imagine that same money becoming a trip to a national park, a simple picnic, or a baking class with Mira. Somehow those moments felt more vivid than every toy box in our living room. I hadn't shared those thoughts with Armand yet. I still wasn't sure whether I wanted to change the way we spent money or the way we showed love. That night, after every light had been turned off, I looked across our living room filled with things. Our home seemed complete, yet for the first time, it felt as though there was an empty space that nothing could fill. A few days later, Mira's school announced an extra day off. I decided not to plan anything except staying home and spending the day with her. We baked a simple batch of cookies using ingredients we already had at home. Flour covered the counter, chocolate smudged Mira's cheek, and we laughed at the uneven shapes we made. Later, we built a small blanket fort in the living room. There were no new toys and no glowing screens, only our imagination filling the space. Near the end of the afternoon, Mira hugged me with a wide smile. In a quiet voice, she said, "Mom, today was more fun than when I got a new toy." Her words left me quiet for a few moments. Not because they surprised me, but because they sounded so honest coming from a child. I thought about every gift we had bought over the years. Then I tried to remember which ones Mira talked about the most, and my mind kept returning to picnics, family outings, and simple afternoons together. That was the moment I began to notice something I had overlooked for a long time. Maybe my daughter wasn't looking for more toys. Maybe what she missed most was having more moments when we were truly with her. That night, after Mira had fallen asleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that had already gone cold. I let the quiet help me gather thoughts that had felt scattered for so long. I realized I had always connected gifts with love. Whenever I felt busy or exhausted, buying something seemed like the quickest way to say, "Mom was thinking about you." Without noticing it, I had slowly started replacing time with things. Not because I didn't want to be there, but because giving a gift felt easier than giving my full attention. I had never meant to spoil Mira. I only wanted her to feel loved, even on the days when I barely had any energy left. Now I was beginning to see it differently. Toys could bring excitement, but attention was what truly made a child feel seen. I remembered how Mira's eyes lit up when we baked together. It wasn't because everything turned out perfectly, but because, for a few hours, nothing mattered more than being together. That was when I understood something simple, but deeply meaningful. Maybe the best family memories never came from what we bought, but from how we were truly there for one another. The next evening, after the house had grown quiet again, I finally shared everything that had been on my mind with Armand. I wasn't bringing a complaint, only a question that had stayed with me all day. "Do you think we've been buying too many gifts for Mira?" I asked quietly. Armand didn't answer right away and simply looked down at the table for a few moments. "I think we were only trying to see her happy," he said at last. His voice wasn't defensive and instead sounded like someone beginning to wonder about the same thing. I nodded slowly. "I've been wondering if we're giving her what she truly needs," I said after a quiet pause. Armand smiled a little before speaking again. We both fell quiet as we remembered that Mira's favorite stories were rarely about her toys. That night, we made one simple decision together. We weren't giving up gifts forever, but we wanted to choose shared experiences more often. We even gave the idea a simple name so we would remember it. Before buying another gift, we would first ask whether that money could become a better memory if it was spent on time together. A week later, we decided to follow through on that small decision. Instead of going to a toy store, we packed a simple lunch and headed to the city park together. No gift boxes were waiting to be opened that afternoon. There was only a small blanket, sliced fruit, warm bread, and time that seemed to move a little more slowly. Myra ran after a butterfly before calling us over to look at clouds that she thought looked like a rabbit. Armand and I laughed with her without feeling the need to hurry home. On the way home, Mira held my hand tightly. "Mom, when can we have another picnic?" she asked with bright, hopeful eyes. I smiled as I glanced toward Armand. Hearing that question felt very different from the requests for new toys we used to hear so often. Things did not change overnight in our home. Mira still noticed new toys sometimes, and we still bought one once in a while, but we paused and thought before deciding. Little by little, our living room began to feel more open. Not because there were fewer things, but because it slowly filled with more shared memories than possessions. I now believe that a gift doesn't always have to come wrapped with a ribbon. Sometimes the most meaningful gifts are a quiet afternoon, an uninterrupted conversation, or laughter that happens without any plan. I've learned that children may forget many of the toys they once owned, yet they often hold on to simple memories that their parents almost forgot themselves. If there's one thing I want to keep from this journey, it's reminding myself that love doesn't always need something new. More often, it simply needs someone to be fully present. If this small story from my family stayed with you today, you may enjoy the other stories in Clara's family journal. We'll keep learning together, one step at a time, as we build a warmer, more thoughtful, and closer family life. Now, I'd love to ask you something. What's the childhood memory you remember most? A gift, or a simple moment with someone you loved? Share it in the comments, and I'll see you in the next journal.